All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're exploring a totally different kind of battlefield. It's one where the weapons are completely invisible and the front lines are, well, pretty much everywhere. We're talking about the incredibly complex world of cyberwarfare.
Picture this. 1 minute, the lights are on, hospitals are up and running, your money is safe in the bank. The very next minute, everything just stops. A whole city is paralyzed, but not by a bomb or an invasion, by a few lines of code.
And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? If nobody was physically hurt, but an entire country's economy was just brought to its knees, does that count as an attack? And maybe more importantly, how do you even begin to fight back?
To even start to answer that, we first have to wrap our heads around what we're actually talking about here. See, this is not your typical conflict, and it's those differences that make it so unbelievably hard to get a handle on. So the key word here is intent. We're not talking about some teenager in a basement hacking for kicks. Cyber warfare is when a nation-state uses digital tools as a weapon, to shut down critical infrastructure, steal military secrets, or just generally destabilize a rival government.
Now this is where it gets interesting, because you have to sort of untangle the different motives. All these things use similar tools, right? But their goals are worlds apart. A hacker who's just out to steal credit card numbers? That's a cybercriminal. A government stealing the blueprints for a new fighter jet? That's cyber espionage. But a government intentionally shutting down another country's power grid? Now we're in the territory of cyber warfare.
And you gotta understand, this battlefield operates by a totally different set of rules. The attackers are like ghosts, hiding behind layers and layers of servers all over the world. A tiny country with a few brilliant hackers can cause massive damage to a superpower. That's what we call asymmetry. And an attack? It can cross the entire globe in a split second. Who needs missiles when a single line of code can freeze a whole financial system? And that leads us to the single biggest problem of all. We've got this brand new 21st century form of conflict, but we're trying to manage it with a rulebook that was written for a world of tanks and battleships.
Take the UN Charter, for example. It's basically the foundation of modern international law, and it forbids the use of force. Simple enough, everyone agrees a missile strike is a use of force. But what if a cyber attack just erases a country's central bank records? It would cause unimaginable chaos and suffering, but with zero physical damage. The law it wasn't built for this.
Now, to be fair, people have tried to figure this out. The most famous attempt is something called the Tallinn Manual. A bunch of experts got together and said, look, if a cyber attack causes the same kind of damage as a bomb, like say it forces a dam to open and flood a town, then it should be treated like a bomb. Makes sense, right? But here's the catch. It's just guidance from experts. It's not a treaty. No country is actually legally bound to follow it.
Let's think about the most basic, fundamental rule of war, something straight out of the Geneva Conventions. You do not target civilians. You aim for military targets. That's it. Sounds simple, right?
Well, not in cyberspace. This is where it all falls apart. That power grid, it's running military command centers, and it's also running the local hospital. The internet, it carries top secret military communications, and it also carries your video calls to your family. This is the whole dual-use infrastructure problem. How in the world do you attack the military part without completely devastating the civilian part? It's nearly impossible.
So this all leads to some huge practical challenges. I mean, even if the laws were crystal clear, trying to apply them in this kind of shadow war is an absolute nightmare for investigators.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about hypotheticals. This is really happening, and it's getting more intense all the time. Back in 2010, the Stuxnet virus was this huge wake-up call, a digital weapon that physically destroyed nuclear equipment in Iran. Fast forward to 2015, we saw attacks shutting down parts of Ukraine's power grid in the middle of winter. And then, in 2020, the SolarWinds hack showed how an enemy could sneak into the highest levels of government just by hiding inside a routine software update.
So when a country gets hit, they immediately face 4 massive, almost impossible hurdles. First, who even did this? Second, was this attack bad enough to actually count as an act of war? Third, what's a fair way to respond that isn't an overreaction? And fourth, how can we possibly hit back without hurting innocent people? It's just this chain of incredibly tough questions.
But honestly, out of all of those, that first one, attribution, the who did it part, that's the real killer. A country can just hire a criminal hacking group to do its dirty work and then turn around and deny everything. Proving that direct link between the government and the hackers is so difficult. It leaves the victim basically staring into the dark with no clear enemy to retaliate against.
So, where does that leave us? Well, we're basically stuck on a digital front line where the technology is sprinting ahead while the laws that are supposed to govern it are still just learning how to crawl.
Now, there are people working on this. The UN is trying to create some basic rules of the road, these voluntary norms of behavior. NATO has drawn a line in the sand, saying a major cyber attack could trigger their collective defense clause, just like a physical invasion. But the progress is painfully slow, and getting all the major world powers to agree on anything, well, you know how that goes.
And as if all that wasn't complicated enough, the clock is absolutely ticking. Because there's something coming over the horizon called quantum computing. It's a technology so powerful, it could potentially shatter all the encryption that currently protects our banking, our government secrets, pretty much all of our communications. Just try to imagine a world with no digital locks on anything. That's the future we might be heading for.
And this is exactly why you hear experts give this really chilling warning. A surprise attack that takes out a nation's critical infrastructure, we're talking power, water, finance, communications, the whole shebang, that could be every bit as devastating as a traditional military strike, maybe even more so. Which leaves us with one last massive question. Is it time for a whole new set of rules, a kind of digital Geneva Convention, something that's explicitly designed to protect civilians from the crossfire of this new, invisible war? But what would that even look like? And could we ever get everyone to agree to it? That's the challenge we're all facing on this new battlefield.